There are no sacred texts in witchcraft. That is the opinion that most of us witches have. There is no Bible of witchcraft, no Quran of witchcraft, nothing that embodies every single aspect of witchcraft that we can go to and read. And generally, I agree with it. But as with everything in witchcraft, we can craft our own way and find our own path to doing things that inspire us and that drive our spirituality and our craft forward. So today, I want to speak to you about sacred texts in witchcraft and how you can find yours, use yours. So to start things off, I will tell you what my sacred text is that I work with, and it is The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. Now, some of you may think it is weird to call a fictional book written by some person a sacred text. But essentially, what it means to me is that I have a set of practices that assigns meaning to this text in a way that could be called sacred, because I consult it, I work with it, I read it very often, I read paragraphs, random paragraphs, or I read it in order, I read the whole thing. You know, there are a lot of options to working with a text. And I think we can really take a page out of Christianity's book here. I know as witches, a lot of us have a resistance to Christianity, which absolutely makes sense given the history. But at the same time, they do have some practices that could be helpful, because there are a lot of Christians who read the Bible every day. And I think this interaction, this close relationship with a text, is something incredibly potent. And in witchcraft, being able to choose our own text, that has a lot of power and a lot of potential to help us in our self-development and in developing our path with this craft. Now, I want to tell you how you can find your sacred text. The first part of choosing it, the first thing to do if you want to find out what your sacred text is to probably think about texts from your childhood or stories from your childhood. Because let me tell you, I did not read this book until about 5 years ago. I actually only watched the movie as a child, The Last Unicorn, and resonated deeply with it and have rewatched it so many times. And when I found out that there was a book, which I was unaware of, that is when I knew that this book would be special to me. I started reading it and it was special, and that is how my relationship developed. So if you want to find out what your sacred text is, do think about what stories, what mythologies, what narratives you were drawn to as a child, because your sacred text could be a children's book, it could be a young adult novel, it could be a classic, that one of those things that's part of the literary canon that everybody should have read. What you develop a close relationship with is really up to you. So the first thing that I'm calling you to do is to think of stories that you felt drawn to and write them down. Think about what books you were drawn to, what movies you were drawn to, and see what comes of it. Then the second part is to start working with them. You don't have to establish a routine quite yet, and you don't have to call them sacred right away. Of course, you first want to kind of play around with it. Start with reading random paragraphs, which may also be called bibliomancy, because essentially you are using it as a divination tool. When you are in trouble, when you need help, or even when you just need inspiration in the morning or in the evening, you can start reading these books, start developing a relationship with them, see how it feels, see if it's powerful to you. And in that way, you will end up working your way towards establishing a deep connection with the text and also being able to relate it to your life. Because when I read certain passages in The Last Unicorn now, I know when I read them in what mental state I was and what they mean to you. It's kind of like with tarot cards, where after a while, if you see the Seven of Wands and you pulled it at a very pivotal time in the past, you will still remember it every time you draw that card, without it being limiting, but it's just kind of like, oh, that feeling, you know, that memory. And that's sort of what happens when I open a random part of the book and I remember something when I read it last. One subject that I want to tackle is the death of the author. I am a strong believer in that concept ever since I went to university and studied literature, and even before then, I had a strong feeling that the author didn't really matter all that much. So just because I use The Last Unicorn as a sacred text does not mean that I know a lot or even anything about Peter S. Beagle, because in the long run, it doesn't matter to me. If you think that knowing something about the author, for example, if you resonate with the work of Hemingway and you also resonate with the life of Hemingway, if you think it adds something to your practice, that's great. But don't feel like you need to know everything about the author just because you chose it as your sacred text. I just wanted to put that in as a little bit of an interlude and a note to self for you. Don't care about the author too much unless you think it will benefit you. So as we move further ahead, as a third step, you should probably establish a routine. If you know this text is helpful and powerful to you, see if you can read it in the morning and in the evening every single day. Now, if that doesn't feel powerful to you anymore, feel free to stop it, but it is a great way to quickly develop a connection with a text. And I would also recommend that you find out what works best for you with regards to choosing the spot. For me personally, I nearly always, open a random page and read a random paragraph. And usually after I ask for guidance or after I give out a call to present me with a good paragraph, it nearly always hits the spot. It's always good advice, or it gives me a different perspective on what I'm struggling with or something that I've been thinking about. So do that, or you can base the spot that you're reading on something else. For example, it's the 7th day of the month, so you're going to read page 7. Or maybe you take the sum of today's date, like 7th of July, 7 plus 7, and read the 14th page based on that. So find out whatever practice works best for you. You can always start at the top, start at the back, and read backwards the chapters. It is up to you how you work creatively with the text. And over time, those are really the steps that will allow you to get good guidance from a book, especially when you don't feel up to other methods of divination such as tarot. Because for me personally, I need to have some energy. I need to be awake to do tarot. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of waddle around and the card meanings will remain kind of gray because I just don't have the energy to read for myself. But then if I take out the book and read a paragraph, it's a lot easier because the story is already there, the words are already there. I just have to relate to it and figure out what it means for me. And that is a lot easier than working with tarot cards that require attention and require a meditative state usually. So this is also a great practice if you've fallen off the wagon, if you feel like you don't have a strong practice at the moment, you don't have the energy. Do find any book really in the beginning and do some bibliomancy and just write your thoughts about the paragraph that you just read. And then over time, you will get to the point where you may want to refer to the text as sacred. If you never get to that point and you always just, see it as an important text, that is fine as well. In the end, I just want to encourage you to work with a book in your witchcraft practice, whether it's one book or multiple books, and to take it to a new level. Take your relationship to fiction to a new level. You could even use poetry if you want to do that. That is fine as well. If you're kind of unsure why a text is resonating with you and you want to find out more about that, then you can also think about what is going on in the text that you like. Like, why is the story speaking to you? Why is a specific character so important for you? Or why does the language of the text appeal to you? And in looking at all of these questions as a last step, you can also develop kind of an intellectual understanding of what it means for you. Because everything I've said before is kind of an intuitive thing. It's kind of a emotional relationship. But if you want to take it to an intellectual level, do examine the character, the plot line, the language, and see what it means for your life right now and why it is so powerful. For me personally, the last unicorn is always going to be relevant no matter what part of my life I am in. And that is why it is so special to me, because a lot of the time I have characters, archetypes, I have made videos about this. I will link some of them down below that I vibe with for a while. They help me for a while and accompany me on my path. But then in the end, I move on to another story, another archetype that is useful to me right then and there in the emotional state and mental state that I am in. But with the last unicorn, it's just always helpful. It is kind of a constant for me. So do think about what would be a constant for you in your practice. If you want to support me, please check out my Patreon. I will link it down below. It also has some perks for you, and I will link my book review playlists as well, so you have some more to watch, and archetype playlists as well. So that is it from me for today. Let me know in the comments if you work with a book like this and how you work with it so that we can inspire each other. I love you all so much, and I will see you very soon. Have the greatest of days and the greatest of weeks.